Okay, so this is the very first attempt at a podcast for The Real Respawn. It is a divorce dedicated podcast where we illustrate through conversation the various aspects of divorce. Because with 8 billion people on this earth, no two divorces are going to be alike, no matter how similar they are. People are different. The times are different. No two divorces are the same. So our first guest is actually my mom. The reason I chose her for the first interview is because of all the divorces I've ever heard of in my life, hers was the easiest. And there are a lot of dynamics that play into that, and we're going to get into that during this interview, this conversation. And the purpose of this is to show everybody that's watching that not every divorce has to be a knockdown, drag-out fight. Sometimes it just ends.
Yep.
And I might be talking a little bit loud. I'm sorry, I don't have any way to adjust the input volume on my mic. So anyway, Rita Wells.
Hi, everybody.
So the thing that does get me about your divorce is the fact that it was just an end.
It was.
There was no continuation. There was no an attempt at getting you back. There was no attempt at fixing it, and there was no remorse.
No, and it was, we were really young when we got married. I was 17. I finished out my high school career as a married woman. And so we were just young and stupid, and technically that marriage lasted 5 years, but in reality it only lasted a year and a half.
Expound on that.
Well, we lived together as husband and wife for only a year and a half, long enough to have a child. Your sister Amber was born out of that marriage. Such a blessing. But we were just young and stupid. I got married for the wrong reason. I don't know why he got married, but I got married to get out of the house. As bad as that sounds, I know, we just should never have been married. It was just one of those things. And when it was time to end, the ending wasn't as easy, as you would think. It just ended. We weren't that friendly with each other, but I met your dad at that same time, the time that it ended. And no, he wasn't the reason it ended, although the rumors have said so. So for me, it was easy. The transition, there was no transition, and I know that sounds bad, but it was just time, He cheated a lot. And so it ended.
So going into your marriage with Larry, his name is Larry, going into your marriage with Larry, what was sort of the deciding factor on getting married?
Oh, I have 20/20 hindsight on that. At the time, I really couldn't tell you. But thinking back on it, I think the real deciding factor is there were too many people in my household, and I wanted to get out. And for me, that was the way to get out.
Okay, I can see that. So, what people sometimes tend to forget or just don't even know is that family dynamics through adolescence plays a huge role in your relationships. Mm-hmm. And you had a lot of brothers and one sister, right?
Right. But at that time, Mama was married to someone she just met, not too long before I left the house. He had 3 kids. So I was the oldest of 6 kids. And so when she married him, he brought his 3 kids. So we've got 9 kids in the household, 2 adults. And then occasionally his brother would come to live with us. So we're talking What's that, 10 people?
That's quite a few people.
No, 12 people.
I have trouble being in a situation where there are that many people that I actually like.
I know.
I mean,
Right.
as avoidant as that sounds, just sometimes people overwhelm you, and
Yes.
the more people there are, the faster that happens.
Yes.
So, you know, growing up with so many, just the siblings, completely ignore all those people that should never have been there. Just the siblings, growing up with so many siblings, and I know you had to take on a pretty adult role in your household because your mama was always gone working, and I know she had several relationships after your father died. And you know, outside of basically having to become an adult as a child, did you find it very difficult to receive affirmation and affection from your mother?
Oh, yes. Yes, and it's not that she didn't love us. It's just that she was so busy trying to take care of us, survive, because she was a working mom. You know, her second husband, well, I mean, they got married when I was 5. I called him Daddy, right? And so it wasn't incredibly hard until after he left. He left when I was 14. So I don't know, at that point, Mama was the sole provider for the family, and it was difficult. I remember some pretty scarce meals, you know?
I can see that.
Yeah.
So, looking back on it, how do you feel like your mom's relationships with men shaped your outlook on relationships with men, including and especially marriage?
You know, that's kind of a tough question for me because I never really thought about it. I don't know, honestly, because it was just life. You know, the things that she went through with her marriages, it was just life. And I've got to say, she was married 5 times. My dad died when I was 4. And then she married another guy, and he was Daddy for 9 years, right? And then from there, she married another guy, and that didn't last long at all. And then she met Chuck. I'm sorry, back up. She remarried her second husband, which she said was a mistake, and it was. And then she met Chuck, and that was her longest lasting marriage, and he died also. So she was married 5 times, widowed twice. So, I mean, she's been through a lot. And looking at all of her relationships, I don't know. Honestly, I haven't even thought about it, how any of that affected my choice in men.
Well, okay, so go a little deeper into that. You got to see the dynamics between your mom and the men she'd married, and gotten in relationships outside of that. How did that shape your viewpoint on the man that you're married to, my father? Because I remember growing up, there were a lot of hard times between the two of you, some of which did shape how I viewed relationships, and that's not something you really get away from.
Yeah.
But you know, looking back on all those hard times and hearing your story, I could see how it's possible that some of the difficulties could be related to not just your viewpoint on relationships because of what you've experienced with your mom's relationships, but also his, because my father is the son of, well, 2 divorcees.
Yeah.
Okay, which, of course, you know, it sounds like, well, of course he's got 2 divorcees as parents because they were married and now they were divorced. But his mother was divorced more than once. Similar story to your mom, but, well, let's be fair, a whole lot more money involved in hers.
Right.
But anyway, so looking at your marriage to my dad and your mom's marriages with her men, how do you think that your approach to your marriage could have been in some way influenced? You serious? Okay, ooh. Sorry, I've been having technical difficulties all day. I thought my phone, which I'm recording on, crapped out on me.
Okay.
So anyway, back to the
good.
question.
We're good. What was the question?
Question. First podcast. First podcast. This is going to happen. That's no problem. At least we're human.
I know,
At least we're
right?
human. We're not robots. So anyway, the question is, looking back at the years that you've been married to my dad, how do you think that your observation of your mother's relationships with men shaped your approach to your behaviors and boundaries and standards with your husband?
My mom is very old-fashioned, and so am I. She didn't show us affection. She didn't do the kiss the boo-boo thing, or, you know, say goodnight, tuck you in, read a bed story, none of that kind of stuff. And that filtered down to me, and that's how I am. And so in my marriage and with the kids, I never really showed that kind of affection. You know, I'm kind of a standoffish kind of, you know, I love hugs, right?
Right.
But showing the affection was difficult, and it still is. We've been together for 41 years almost. You know, this summer will be 41 years, and it's still a struggle with me to show that kind of affection, because I didn't see that in the home. Never heard Mama argue with anybody. In all her marriages, there was never an argument that I heard, you know. But on the flip side of that, I never saw the affection either. And so I really think that probably influenced me more than anything in my marriage.
So, you know, you touched on the question of affection. Okay, so, you know, I'm speaking from the perspective of a man, okay? Whenever you're in a relationship with someone and the affection isn't there, it can be pretty devastating, okay?
Yes,
Because
yes.
it's very easy to be convinced that that person doesn't care about you. And this is something that I dealt with in my marriage,
Yeah,
okay?
right.
Which, for those of you who don't know, who don't watch my other channels, I'm actually in the midst of a divorce right now. And this is one of the issues that we had throughout our relationship that unfortunately never really got resolved. So, again, whenever a man is in a relationship with a woman, the level of affection, the enjoyment of the affection on the woman's part, and the intensity of that affection all play a part in how the man perceives his relationship. Because when a man thinks about love, he's not thinking about the flowers. He's not thinking about the dates. He's not thinking about the movies. He's not thinking about the cuddling, which, you know, cuddling is helpful because there's that physical contact. But the affection, especially in the bedroom, that affection is an opportunity to connect on an extremely intimate level.
Yes, yes.
But it's also sort of a gauge, a measuring stick to determine the status of the relationship. Okay, so a woman, she needs affirmation by word and sacrifice, okay? Whereas a man needs that same affirmation through the intensity, frequency, and enjoyment on the woman's part of the affection that's shown to him. Okay, because if a woman is showing affection begrudgingly, that tells him that he's not really being loved so much as just served.
Yeah.
Okay, so a
makes
man needs that kind of affection. And of course, you know, you've heard other podcasters say, well, you know, a man needs respect. Well, of course, a man does need respect.
Yeah.
And it's hard for a woman to have respect for a man if he's not able to provide more than just necessities. So if a woman doesn't have her creature comforts also, and one of those comforts is unfortunately surplus of money, okay?
Yeah.
Just having money isn't enough. We have to have enough money to do things that we want to do without questioning how we're going to recuperate. And that makes sense. I understand. I'm not
Yeah.
bashing that, but
Yeah.
in my opinion, that's not something to endanger a relationship over. It happens often enough.
Right. Right.
So, on a woman's part, respect is only given when the woman feels comfortable. Might be oversimplifying it, but there's only so far we can go into that before we start deviating.
Yes.
Yeah,
You know,
so-
let's not go there.
Yeah, so a man needs respect.
Yeah.
That's part of how he feels loved
And attention.
and attention. Also, whenever what he says is visibly accepted.
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, if you're sitting there arguing with the man, whenever he says something, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be something as simple as, yeah, I didn't really like that shirt you wore today because it just didn't suit you. Okay, and then it turns into an argument. Well, now he's like, well, okay, now I can't give my wife valuable input.
Yeah.
Now she's walking around with something that just doesn't look good on her. It has nothing to do with her. It just wasn't the right choice for, or wasn't the best choice for clothing to complement her. And so now he has to just let her do that and feel like if anybody opens up and says, hey, that shirt's just not you, now she's going to be devastated.
Yeah.
Of course, at the same time, if he says it, that's why she argues, because now she's devastated. You don't like what I put on? Because she translates that as, well, I'm ugly because the
Pretty
shirt
much.
didn't suit me. Well, the truth is, it had nothing to do with whether she was pretty or ugly. Some things just don't suit you. If I walk around in a pink polo, it's not going to suit me.
Yeah.
There could be 1 million women out there who think I'm the most gorgeous man on earth, which obviously I know that's not happening. There could be 1 million women out there who think I'm the most gorgeous man on earth, but that pink shirt is not going to look good on me.
Yeah.
It's just not. So anyway, yeah, so there's a lot that goes into the relationship, and a lot of the destruction of a relationship comes from the differences between how men and women feel loved. So, yeah, so you were talking about how you have trouble showing that kind of affection, and one of the questions that I've had is, whenever that question comes up, the question of showing affection, intimacy, what goes through your head that pushes you to withdraw? Is that too? Is the answer going to be too graphic?
No. You're asking questions that I don't really think about. I just go through life, and this is how things are. I don't really do. I do a lot of introspection, but yeah, these questions they're making me think.
That's kind of the purpose of doing this podcast, because
I know.
because okay, so you're my mother. You're 20 years older than me, okay?
Yeah.
You've got 20 years of life experience on me. But at the same time, I've experienced things in my life and even in my marriage that you've never experienced.
Right, they're all different.
Just because we're 20 years apart, and I'm growing up in a generation and in a lifestyle that didn't exist when you were my age. I remember when you were my age, and the whole world was different.
Oh yes.
The lifestyle that we lived whenever I was 20 years old, 19, 20 years old.
Yeah.
My lifestyle was very flippant and free. Okay, I spent absurd amounts of money on hobbies that I don't even do anymore because they just didn't suit the lifestyle anymore, okay? And then the lifestyle that you and my father lived was very, well, yeah, okay, it's financially difficult. It's always been financially difficult as long as I can remember, but your lifestyle was very simple.
Basic. Yes, simple.
Okay, there was nothing to complicate it.
Right.
And yeah, you still had your arguments, you still had your fights. Some of them got pretty heated, and that's just how it goes sometimes.
Mhm.
But overall, it was a pleasant, simple life.
Yeah. we
And
like
so the
simple.
things that I experienced didn't really exist to be experienced back then. And a lot of that is because of the change of our culture, the now extreme, ridiculous dependence on technology.
Yes.
I mean, you can't talk to somebody without it.
Mhm.
You can't get a job without it.
That's right.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you are technologically illiterate, you eliminate probably 80% of job opportunities that exist
That's
right
true.
now.
But also stress. Technology brings a lot of stress.
Yes, that is something that we forget to remember. So, you know, my generation and the generation after me, we've become accustomed to filling our free time with what's called doom scrolling. I'm sure you've heard that before, doom scrolling.
Yes.
And that doom scrolling is you're flipping through videos just to occupy your mind because what's happening out here isn't as engaging. That's just the simple truth of it. It's not as engaging.
Yeah.
Okay? And what all that doom scrolling does is it fills your mind with more questions than answers. And that is where stress comes from. Whenever you have all these questions, no way to answer them.
Yeah.
Okay? And it could be something as simple as just some ridiculous video that doesn't really even amount to anything. It'd just be just simple humor. A compilation of dogs running into glass windows, and it programs your mind to crave that simple distraction.
Yeah.
So anything outside of that increases stress. That's just
Yeah.
the truth of it. And that didn't exist, at least to this degree, 20 years ago.
That's true. That's true. I don't even know if Facebook existed 20 years ago. Did it?
20
Oh,
years
no
ago,
idea.
Facebook existed 20 years ago. I
Did it?
do remember that. It had been around for a while, but back then MySpace was the thing.
That's right.
I miss MySpace. Tom, if you're listening, please buy MySpace back from Justin Timberlake and fix it. I miss it way better than Facebook. Some of this is probably going to end up on Facebook. I don't know.
Right?
So anyway, yeah, so a lot of this stuff didn't exist 20 years ago, at least not to this degree. There are YouTube videos and stuff like that, but you didn't have anything like shorts.
I know.
I mean,
know.
the average video length was what, 5 minutes long?
Yeah.
Something like that?
It's crazy.
Rhett and Link, that's where they lived.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
early 2000s, that was where they lived. They started in 2006, and their videos are hilarious. If you ever get the opportunity to look up Rhett and Link, that's RHETT and Link, like from Legend of Zelda. Look them up. Those guys are hilarious. Anyway,
Side note.
that's not a plug, by the way. I'm not getting paid to do this but I just find their content hilarious. They used to do music videos that were absolutely amazing. Look up So Dang Dark. That one's hilarious. Anyway, yeah, back to the topic at hand.
Right. Get off that rabbit trail.
So yeah, so my life experience is different than yours, largely because I'm growing up in a different environment. Also, something to consider is that you weren't raised by you, but I was. Okay, so you know, my home dynamics were different because my parents were not the same as your parents.
Right.
Because aside from them being 20 years apart from you, their mindsets, their experiences, and their desires shaped the way that they raised you and my dad. They shaped that, okay? Which then also shaped the way that you raised your children.
Yeah.
So
well,
my experience was different than yours at my age and before. And my children, their experience is far different than what mine was when I was a
oh,
kid.
definitely. Yeah.
You know, growing up, I lost count of how many different houses we moved into and out of whenever I was growing up. And my kids only remember 3 or 4 different houses.
Yeah.
And I mean, two of my kids spent most of their younger days in one house.
Mm-hmm.
And so their lifestyle is different than mine. Their experience is different than mine. And they grew up in this technology that allows us to do what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm using the phone that I carry every day to make phone calls to record a podcast.
Right.
That wasn't possible 20 years ago.
No, it wasn't. Mm-mm.
So anyway, I kind of forgot where I was going with all this, but I guess what I was really getting at was how relationships differ now from then.
Mm-hmm.
How your mindset of the relationship is different
Yeah.
from my generation because we lived completely different lives.
And I think it's more difficult for couples, families, in this day and time, because even with my generation, it took both parents working to survive. You know, if you didn't have an education, you know, back then that was the thing, you had to have an education to make any money. That's not true today.
Right.
You know,
That's
however, back then, I chose to stay home with the kids. Every once in a while, I would go get a job because we needed the financial help. I homeschooled y'all. You know, that was the thing for me to do. I mean, I loved it. So, you know, I stayed home. That's why it was so difficult for us financially. Back in my mom's day, moms didn't work. They took care of the kids. Now, growing up, she did work because, you know, we were a poor family. You
Yeah.
know, she had 6 kids, and it did take both of them, and it was difficult. Today, you must have both parents working.
Yeah, that's true.
It is ridiculous. And if you have 4 kids like you do, even more so. And so the family suffers when both parents are working. Not financially. They suffer emotionally. Right?
That's true. That is true.
The kids need both parents, but definitely at least one parent in the home all the time, taking care of them. And so that suffers. The marriage suffers. Why? Because the parents come home, they're tired from working, mom still has to cook, sometimes dad, you know, that works. And there's just so much stress involved
Yes, there is.
that the marriage suffers, and that leads to divorce.
Unfortunately, that's true. So this was what was different, I think, with your divorce than most. When the divorce happens, there's a lot of hurt feelings, not about the relationship, but about the fact that the relationship is ending.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and sometimes that's between that's the person that's being divorced and the one that initiated the divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the one that initiates the divorce hurts from it. Okay, unfortunately, that's not always the case because it's hard to convince yourself that the person that's comfortable and happy with initiating the divorce ever really cared. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of refreshing to see that sometimes the divorce doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so like, you know, your marriage to Larry, you told me, and I've heard this story a lot of times, and I glean something new each time, but that your marriage to him was really just not much of a marriage
Not
because
really.
he cheated on you a lot, and you told me some of the stories, and some of them were pretty messed up. I mean, I don't really have a whole lot of room to talk. I wasn't to be honest, I wasn't the best husband myself. Trying to do better, you know. You can look at my other YouTube channel by my name, Desmond Wells. Not to be confused with my father, Desmond Wells. So my other YouTube channel is dedicated to. It used to be dedicated to getting over divorce because I was quite angry with my wife, not just for divorcing me, but for the reasons that she did. Things that I'm still dealing with, trying to understand. But Now it's more along the lines of trying to be better, be a better person so you're not so toxic, because I don't care who you are, you're toxic and you need to be better.
Yeah.
No matter how much you fixed, no matter how much you've repaired, no matter how much of you've undamaged, you're toxic till the day you die. The idea is to just be less toxic each day. So, back to Larry and his mistresses that you got to meet. I don't want to go too deep into that because I know that that can be a pretty damaging experience.
Yeah.
And for you ladies and even you men who have unfortunately experienced the same thing, we know that whenever you get to meet the other person that your spouse, that you're still in that relationship with, is bringing home, we know that's damaging. We know that it can cause a hurt that really isn't describable. Just know that that doesn't mean anything as far as who you are. That doesn't determine who you are, and it doesn't define it. That's just somebody being stupid. So anyway,
Right.
so I can see how it'd be easy for you to end that relationship, because it wasn't just about the fact he cheated, it was about the fact he was unrepentant.
Right.
So, from a woman's perspective, because we know how a man thinks about cheating, we really do. Because for a man, it's not so much as my heart hurts because I wasn't good enough. It's, what have I been doing all this time? If this is what I mean to you. Okay, so from a woman's perspective, experiencing that, and I'm sorry if it gets to be too much, but experiencing that where you get to see what that person really thinks of you, and what could possibly have been in your mind a definition of your worth. Where does your mind go whenever you experience something like that?
Well, for most women, it's, I'm not good enough. I'm not beautiful enough. You know, I'm not doing stuff that he wants, you know, in the bedroom. For me, it wasn't that at all. It was like, what the heck is wrong with you? Seriously, what is wrong with you that you need to go somewhere else?
That's a healthy response. That's actually a very healthy response. People, take notes. That is a healthy response. It's not, oh my God, what is wrong with me? What did I do to deserve this? It's, what the world is wrong with you? I like that.
Well, see, and without going into too many details about that aspect of things, you know, I knew from the very beginning when we got married. 2 weeks later, he told me he was with somebody just a few weeks before that.
He didn't waste any time at all.
No, not at all. And so I knew from the get-go that, oh yeah, this is happening. And so it continued. To make a long story short, when I was pregnant with Amber, I'm guessing to allay his guilt, if there was such a thing with him, of cheating, he asked me to have an open marriage. I agreed. So,
Okay.
fair game, right? So neither one of us is innocent on the arena of adultery in that marriage. So when it came to an end, for me, it was more like a sigh of relief. We're done. And you know, at the beginning of the video, I said that that marriage technically lasted 5 years. That's because for the 3.5 years after we actually split up, I was with your daddy, neither one of us could afford a divorce. We couldn't afford it. Then when he finally met someone that he was really interested in marrying, he went outside the United States to get the divorce. He went through the Dominican Republic. And in that day, you didn't get online to look. You found it in the newspaper. So I'm guessing he found an ad in the paper and followed that ad and got a divorce through the Dominican Republic because they're cheap.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's how that happened. A month later, I married your daddy.
Wow.
Yeah. So we finally made it right.
Yeah, so I have a similar story, but on the other side of it. So, for those of you who have not watched my other channel, named after me, I really should change that name to something a little more catchy than Desmond Wells. So anyway, so I did cheat on my wife. Something I'm not really proud of, and something I'm struggling to accept that I even did. Not because of guilt, but because of the knowledge of what that sort of behavior causes in a person's mind. I'm not innocent in the demise of our relationship. Again, the point is to be better than you were before. And yeah, I actually have to say that I kind of followed that path as well. That whenever I got to the point where I was feeling so ashamed and guilty for what I'd done, and of course I was kind of angry because one of the reasons that I did what I did was because I really was searching for that affection that I wasn't getting from my wife. And not to blame her, but it's just some people just lack the self-control to deal and understand. And unfortunately, I was one of those people. So I asked her to have an open relationship. It's probably a good thing that she wouldn't let it happen. We're getting a divorce anyway, but that's beside the point in this particular discussion. But yeah, I did that. I did that same thing. And I don't think my reasoning is the same as Larry's reasoning. I really think Larry was probably just trying to find a way to have his cake and eat it too. Okay.
I agree.
Which, for those of you who are too young to understand that expression, that means you get what you want and you get what you need at the same time, even though they are in conflict.
Right.
Sorry, these mics really pick up a lot of sound. I don't even know how loud I'm being right now. So anyway, but for my part, it was, I guess it was similar as you have my cake and eat it too, but it was equally along the lines of, well, she doesn't want to show me affection in that way. And she really hadn't for a long, long time, even before my first child was born. Which she did anyway, but it was, I guess, because she felt pressured. I don't know. But if my reasoning, erroneously, was that if we were in an open relationship, then if she did go off to the side, she could kind of relate to me to some degree. Which, even if it did end up being that way, it did end up working out the way I thought it would end up just damaging her in the end. Which, so that whole idea was stupid. But another thing was that she didn't have to feel pressured to show me that affection, but I could still get it in a way that wouldn't cause her to hate me, which unfortunately, that's just not how that works.
Yeah.
So it was a stupid idea, and I regret ever having brought it up. So for those of you who are thinking along the same lines, don't do it. Don't even suggest it. Don't think it. You're better off just trying to work out with each other, not apart from each other, but work out with each other the things that are damaged inside you that cause you to do what you do. So she shows signs, my wife shows signs of classic avoidant attachment. Okay, which is a person who, the more you love them, the more they withdraw from you. And then I have to admit, I'm anxious. I am anxiously attached, which is the more they withdraw, the more I need to show them that I love them. So it's an endless chase for affection, when the avoidant needs space and an opportunity to come back to you, whereas the anxious needs constant affirmation and affection.
You know, that sounds a lot like our relationship.
I wasn't going to say anything.
I understand that. But yeah, in listening to you talk, it's like, I'm like that.
Yes.
Yes.
And I have noticed that. And of course, again, it goes back to the way you were raised. And
Yes.
Unfortunately, my wife was raised the exact same way. Her mom was always working. Her dad was never really one much to show affection. And I think a lot of that was because his father was all about money and work. And a lot of that was because they grew up poor.
And
Okay.
I'm wondering if the older generation is like that, because her parents are basically the same age as mine.
They are. As a matter of fact, her dad was only about a year younger than my grandfather,
Yeah.
my dad's dad. And your mom is almost the same age as her mom.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, and I wondered the same thing. And I think a lot of that was because they grew up in the middle of or near the end of the Depression, where the whole thing was about survival. And if you didn't just ignore your emotional needs for work,
Yeah.
then you died
Yeah.
because you couldn't feed yourself. And so they grew up in that, and they become adults, they have kids, and then they just don't know how to show affection.
Right.
Well, her mom was always working. She became a nurse, and her dad was in aside from the way he was raised, he was in a deep, deep depression, because whenever my wife was about 4 years old, he broke his back. So he wasn't able to do the work that was able to bring them money. So
Right.
I know he felt like less of a man, because he wasn't able to provide what he had to.
Yeah.
So, and his wife had to take up the slack. That's damaging to most men.
Yep.
It really is. So anyway, yeah, I mean, avoidant attachment style, anxious attachment style, they're what are classified as insecure attachment styles, meaning not healthy. Okay, so this gets into a kind of a gray area of sorts, where people are like, this is just the way I am, you need to accept it. But that's not really how life works, okay? You have your personality, but your attachment style is not part of your personality. It's actually part of your level of security in yourself, your self-confidence, more or less, okay? The more secure you are in who you are, the healthier your attachment style is, okay? And so, yeah. So if you're avoidant, or like me, anxious, it would be a good idea to find those root causes, work out a plan to escape it, and then do the work to eliminate it. Because an anxious person can't not be shown affection.
Yeah.
It's emotionally scarring.
It is.
But an avoidant person can't be made to allow love to be shown, because it's emotionally scarring.
Yes. You got to find a way to meet in the middle.
And part of that is finding out why you feel that way and how to get out of that. Because regardless of whether that's how you feel or not, that's not healthy. That's not even healthy for you.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
Because that isolates you. Even if that's where you feel comfortable, that can be damaging, because it isolates you.
Right.
We need people. We're social creatures. Some of us just have a smaller threshold for socializing. Even though I'm an anxiously attached person, I actually have a very low threshold for human interaction. I have my person, and that's the person that I need 24/7. Everybody else, they can go do their thing. I'll say hi, we'll hang out, we'll talk, and then I'll get to a point where I can't handle it anymore. Like, I'll have a good day, I'm gone.
Yeah. Yep.
So back to the marriage and divorce aspect. We talked a lot about what goes on in a marriage that ends up ending.
Yes.
Okay. And of course, we talked about the end of your marriage. But this, I believe, is a really important aspect of the divorce itself. You get into another relationship, whether it's a month later, 10 years later. It seems to me that it would be next to impossible, if not actually impossible, to avoid bringing in the scars from the previous relationship to this one. Now, I remember you two fighting a lot when I was younger.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wonder how much of that was scars left behind by previous relationships. Now, my father's never been divorced, but I know he had girlfriends in the past. But I think the most scarring thing for him, if I were to be so bold as to presume, would be his observation and perspective on his parents' relationships. Which I don't want to go too deep into that, but their relationships with the people they chose afterward were not healthy.
Right.
And there's just no escaping that.
That is true.
So you come out of this relationship with, I say so presumptuously, a narcissist. Because that's what that amounts to. A person
You're
who
right.
cares so much about their pleasure, they couldn't care less what they do to you.
You're right.
So, how much of the issues that you had in your marriage to my dad were influenced by the things you went through in your relationship with Larry?
I would have to say 0.
None.
None. And upon reflection, after having this conversation, and I've been thinking on this, since you and your soon-to-be ex have been having problems, I've been listening to you talk, and I'm like, oh wow, that sounds like me. You know, the things that she's doing, that sounds like me. Oh my goodness. And upon reflection, I see now that all of those arguments, most of those arguments, were because of the attention deficit for him.
I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah. Most, if not all. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. Now, of course, I remember a lot of arguments that you guys had that had a lot to do with money, which unfortunately in most marriages that's one of the number one.
Yeah.
I mean, the two top reasons for arguments in most relationships is sex and money,
True.
which is also unfortunately the top 2 reasons that people end up in life troubles outside of marriage, because of sex and money.
They're major things.
Yeah, it's amazing how much it actually goes back to that in just about everything.
I know.
But
I know.
those were most of your arguments.
Yeah.
Affection, because I know it's not just about sex, but affection and money.
Yeah.
Okay, and well, we grow up poor, and sometimes you just can't help it.
Right.
I'd say right now is probably the easiest time in history to make money.
Well, you would think. It depends on your age, obviously.
Yeah, and I really think it depends on how far you're willing to go to get it. Because whenever I was younger, the only real way to get money was to really mess some people around. But now, it's actually possible if you're willing to sacrifice enough of your comfort. It's possible to make vast amounts of money without doing anything immoral.
Yeah, because of technology.
Because of technology.
Yes.
So if I were to say that there's anything, which I'm not entirely, but partly technologically averse, if I were to say that there's one positive thing about technology, it would be that it has made it easier than any time in history to make money without sacrificing morals.
You're right about that.
So, yeah, so I mean, we grew up poor, and it's really hard to look at your family, look at your wife, and look at the state of your home, financial state of your home, and not think, I am failing utterly.
Oh, yeah.
And then comes the wound,
Yeah.
okay? But the wife always has expectations,
Right.
okay? You don't get away from the financial expectations of your spouse, whether it's the woman who's the breadwinner and the man is the stay-at-home, or vice versa. The one who's the breadwinner, they are the ones that have to deal with the pressure of the household finances being enough.
Yes.
Okay, so that adds more stress. Okay, and the one who's a stay-at-home, if there is a stay-at-home, they're the ones with the financial expectations of this is what we need, this is what's missing. And that's actually a healthy way to be. Okay, because the person who is not the breadwinner, they're the ones that should be rightly tasked with auditing your household finances and needs. Okay?
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that person's too busy making money to focus on these things. And even if they tried, they'd miss stuff because they're not the ones at home.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
The problem comes whenever the expectations become requirements. Okay? Because expectation isn't a matter of truth. Expectation is a matter of desire.
Right.
Okay? Because expectation actually comes from a combination of desire, which is centered in emotion, okay, and standards, which is centered in goals. Okay? And goals come from really what you want out of life. Okay? So your standards are a roadmap
Yeah.
or tools with which you can acquire your goals
Right.
or attain your goals. Okay? And then of course your desires, those are the things that you want that would make your life more enjoyable.
Right.
Okay?
Yes.
So your expectations are born of those two things. Okay? Your expectations should never become a requirement. Okay? So the person who has those expectations translate those expectations as requirements. This is what I have to have because I expect it. And when it's not met, there's hostility
It becomes a problem.
because they are now wounded. So when they bring that, and again, it doesn't even have to be a matter of hostility. Hey, baby, we got this thing. There's a shortfall, and we need this. If we don't have this, this bad thing can happen.
Yeah.
But the resources aren't there. So now the breadwinner's like, oh my God, I'm not doing near enough.
I know.
And their wound can cause hostility. And hostility is always born from emotional wounding, always.
Yeah.
Okay, hostility doesn't come from a need to protect yourself. It comes from emotional wounds. So, yeah, so I can see how a lot of your arguments over the years could have been about money and affection.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, most men do absolutely need physical affection.
Yeah.
But they also need emotional affirmation. Okay? You are enough. You get people like me who were wounded in youth by peers. That person that needs the emotional affirmation. You're enough, you're loved, so on. People like me don't receive it well because you were convinced through your life that none of it's true.
Yeah.
So it always feels like manipulation when you get it, but you still need it. So, yeah, and I don't really think my father's so much that way, that he can't receive love.
Right.
He actually loves and adores affirmation.
Yes.
He doesn't just need it. When he gets it, he revels in it.
Well, who wouldn't?
Me.
Oh, besides
Well,
you.
So this goes back to childhood wounds from peers mostly.
Yeah.
It's another thing that I've worked on, and I've pretty much got it worked out. Just now you got to deal with the effects of the change from no, none of that's true, it's all manipulation because I have a whole lifetime to prove that it's not true, to it's probably true despite all that. So, yeah, so if you find something that is a scar, you can't undo the things that caused it. What you can do is look at that scar and say, okay, that's not supposed to be there. And then you work toward healing it.
Yeah.
Like Po said in Kung Fu Panda 2, scars heal. Ignore the lines after that. They don't count. I have 4 kids. I've watched all of them. So anyway, we've covered quite a bit.
Yes.
And the thing to really take away from this, I believe, is that it is entirely possible to look at the relationship that you left or are leaving and say, because they didn't care or didn't care enough, I don't have to be hurt when I leave.
Mm-hmm.
And going into the next relationship, if there was one after that, or is one after that, I don't have to address this new relationship with what I experienced in the last one.
That's right.
Because my father, I know he's been largely faithful
Mm-hmm.
for these, 36 years, 40 years?
41.
Oh, wow, 41 years.
Yes.
I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah. This summer.
Amazing.
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah,
That's a long time.
that's a long time. I'm not even that old yet. And rightly so.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a good takeaway. And if there's anything you'd like to add to the discussion that you would like to address the audience with, now would probably be a good time. So, when we close, there's nothing left unsaid that needs to be said, because now you're talking to people that could be in your generation or younger. You could be talking to people who are now currently in an emotionally, psychologically toxic and damaging relationship, but they're afraid that if they try and get out of it, it's going to scar them.
Yeah, and that really is. It is all about attitude. How you perceive things, how you deal with things. Everything that happens to you, you have the choice of how you deal with it. Whether you hold it in and let it become a scar, or whether you let it go and get on with life. And I know that's difficult. It's easy to say, hard to do, but it is possible. I'm not going to say that I didn't have any, I won't call them scars, but dings from the first marriage. I mean, it was a toxic relationship, but it is possible to get past it. And that's the thing, get past it, just get on with life. And as flippant as that sounds, it's just the attitude to have. Just get on with it.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Now, an alternative perspective, because there are some people that have a great deal of trouble with that particular perspective, like myself included. So I have suspicions about why this happens, but those can be addressed on my other channel, which is named after me, Desmond Wells. There's the plug.
Did y'all get that?
Anyway, if I can't reconcile what is happening with what I've perceived, I can't process it. And
Yeah.
that in itself creates emotional scars. So if you are one of those people that, like me, can't process it, if you can't reconcile what's happening with what you've seen or what you are seeing, then I recommend finding a trustworthy therapist, counselor that can address those issues and help you work through them. I'm doing that right now, okay? As a matter of fact, my counselor just messaged me on Facebook Messenger. Hopefully the vibration didn't interrupt me, because I think my phone did vibrate. Nevertheless, if you have trouble with processing all of this, if you're going through a divorce, proposing divorce to yourself, or just got out of or just went through divorce, and you cannot just say, you know what, it happened, it was bad, it doesn't matter anymore because I'm out of it. If you cannot do that, find a trustworthy therapist to help you reconcile what is happening with what you've seen, so you can process it.
That's right.
So I guess in closing, it's been a good conversation.
Has been.
I'm glad that though I am 20 years younger than you, I was able to bring thoughts to your mind that hadn't been there before.
Right. Now I've got a lot to think about.
And I'm glad for your perspective as well. There are things that you discussed that I might not have thought about on my own, and hopefully that was helpful to all of you out there that might be watching. So what you're going through can end more or less as pleasurably as possible.
Right.
So have a good whatever time of day it is for you, and whatever you do, strive to be better.
That's right.